Let's see here. One person? Hmm. Hmm. All that dog's gonna drive me nuts. So hello. This is the American Conspiracy, the Washington Deception. Why is it called the Washington Deception? Because it's been claimed for years that our first president, George Washington, was a Freemason and that he was an Illuminati or whatever, but it doesn't even say that. Um, so, what I was going to do, what I'm trying to do, I'm recording this while I'm having it live. Don't know how many people I'm going to get on here. Hopefully, I get a lot like I did the other night. But anyway, let's see here. As far as George Washington being a Mason, part of Illuminati or whatever else, I'm going to have to refer back. There were some other things that I wanted to read on here, but I've already made mention of the things that went on with Bill Clinton and all the people that were murdered from 1989 to before he became president. I went over some of them, I think. But even some of the generals and stuff and the people in the service who died unexpectedly because they didn't like how the government was doing things. So, and again, this is a book. This is a book from Bill Grady. It's called How Satan Turned America Against God. And let's see here. I'm trying to see what George Washington said here on this first one. Can't find it now. Secret societies. George Washington was baptized by John Gano. There's a piece of art, picture of that there in Bill Grady's book, How Satan Turned America Against God, on page 206. Displayed above Washington's encased battle sword in the lobby of John Gano Chapel, William Jewell College, Liberty, Missouri. So, I'm just kind of skipping ahead a little bit to the chapter called Freemasonry. I don't know if you see that. And it kind of gives to the hint of the order of the fraternity, from the patriarchs, from the mysteries of the pagans, from the construction of Solomon's temple, From the Crusades, from the Knights Templar, the Roman Collegio Artificers, from the operative Masons of the Middle Ages, from the Rosicrucians, Rosicrucians of the 16th century, from Oliver Cromwell, from Prince Charles Stuart for political purposes, from Sir Christopher Wren at the building of St. Paul's, from Guillers and his friends in 1717. But anyway, the Illuminati. Let's see here. Let's see. Okay. Now, it says regarding George Washington, of the numerous commercials for Freemasonry, none is more prevalently exploited than the venerable name Washington. Did you notice how Alphonse was careful to mention our first president in his Encyclopedia Americana article? Well, if you didn't read that, you should read it. While staying in Charleston, South Carolina during a preaching engagement, I received firsthand experience concerning the Masons' propensity to play the Washington card. And they do. They have Washington and statues, and they have Mason places with Washington, George Washington. He already spoke out against that earlier, and I read it in my last video. On unsuspecting dupes prospects. That's you play the Washington card. It just so happened that the Lord scheduled my meeting to coincide with the 200th anniversary, Bill Grady says, celebration commemorating the founding of the Supreme Council for the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry in Charleston, May 31st, 1801. Over 5,000 Masons were jammed into every motel in the area. But it gets better, even better. To keep everything nice and cozy, the brother delegates were booked in motels according to their individual states. Having driven down from Knoxville, I was surprised to learn that my motel had 180 rooms reserved for Tennessee Masons. I suddenly felt like a blind dog in a meat factory, determined to go undercover and enjoy myself. My first contact was with a Mason and his wife in the elevator. In our brief conversation, he told me they were from Gray, Tennessee. When I commented that I had been in a serious bus accident with 50 preachers in Gray, Tennessee in May 2000, he shocked me by replying, "I remember that incident well. I'm the sheriff that supervised the response." Was I ever glad when that elevator door opened? Among the many idiotic encounters I was privileged to enjoy, one had a particular application with regard to Brother Washington. On the front page of the local newspaper covering the event, a cloth was featured portraying various Masonic symbols. After initiating a discussion with a pair of senior Masons from Knoxville, I naively asked them to enlighten me concerning the significance of the garment displayed in the picture. I could almost feel them winking at each other as I studied the picture in anticipation of their reply. After several dramatic seconds of careful inspection, the one casually asked the other, "Is that Washington's apron?" Not wanting to give myself away, I rejected with typical amazement that the father of our country was also a great standard bearer for the lodges, etc. Then they then politely excused themselves as dinner for 5,000 was being served downtown. Country music icon Roy Clark and Seinfeld's Michael Richards were slated to receive their honorary 33rd degrees as the highlight of the evening. Conversely, it was my privilege to go to a Baptist church and preach the gospel of Jesus Christ that night. At the request of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, Governor Joseph Rittner um, presented a special address on September 8, 1837, entitled Vindication of General Washington from the Stigma of Adherence to Secret Societies. Okay. Vindication of General Washington from the Stigma of Adherence to Secret Societies. Several thousand copies of this message were subsequently printed both in English and German by Ezra Lincoln, how about that, in Boston. The governor stated in his introduction that Washington was an initiate we do not doubt, as many other respectable individuals have been, for it has been the policy of the detestable murder societies to seduce into their ranks the most respectable members of society. Just want to make sure I read that right. And then to bind them to the most shocking anti-Christian oaths and under the still more shocking penalties of death and of various horrid forms to keep the secrets of the institution, which chiefly consists like a band of pirates and robbers of the signs by which they may be known to each other. It is hardly necessary to add that of 100 initiates, 99, though bound by their oaths of silence, had little more to do with the institution. Although claimed as a member and a brother, such were Brother Washington, Brother Judge Marshall, and a great number of others who had been hypocritically brought within the pale of Freemasonry. Rittner then explained how Masons hide behind the credibility of Washington's legacy. Each votary of that order, when pressed by the weight of reason, so easily brought to bear against him by the weakest advocate of democracy and equality, answers every objection by repeating the name of Grand Master Washington. Although Washington, like Benjamin Franklin, had been coaxed into the lodge as an impressionable youth, he quit the same early and stated so in print. He quit the same early and stated this in print. Yet, through the years, Masons have produced a number of spurious letters from Brother Washington, quotations, in support of their noble fraternity. Many have been deceived by these bogus epistles, including the otherwise astute William Steele, who refers to the following note supposedly sent to King David's Lodge in Newport, Rhode Island, on August 22nd, 1790. Being persuaded that just application of the principles of which Freemasonry is founded must be promotive of virtue and public prosperity, I shall always be glad to advance the interests of the society and be considered by them a deserving brother. In his formal address before the Pennsylvania House, Governor Rittner challenged the legitimacy of these letters on the following grounds. Let's see here. Let me read back over this. Rehearse the following notes supposed to sent to you. Okay. All right. Just want to base over this a little bit. Okay. Bogus epistles. Okay. The absence of any signatures. That's on the following grounds. The absence of normally included dates of composition. Not there. The absence of any verified copies in Washington's official letter found in Mount Vernon. Not there. The testimony of Washington's lifelong friend and biographer, Chief Justice John Marshall. Not there. A former Mason himself, whose professional credits claim 11 pages in the Dictionary of American Biography, referring that he had never heard Washington utter a syllable about any letters. Of course, this would have been impossible that had Washington been in charge of the lodges in North America. Incidentally, while Washington's own 19-page article in the Dictionary of American Biography includes a reference to his weekly entries of donations to widows and helpless children. No such mention of any Masonic affiliates can be found. The rest of the story behind Washington's supposed letter to King David's Lodge in 1790 provides an excellent example of Masonic fabrication. Having heard a decade earlier that Washington was the Master Mason of America, the Newport fraternity determined to present him with an appropriate recognition when he visited their city. March 6, 1781, his second trip to Newport. However, after investigating the rumor, they discovered it to be fraudulent. Governor Rittner read from the official minutes dated February 14, 1781. The committee appointed to draft an address to our worthy brother, His Excellency General Washington, report that on inquiry they find General Washington not to be Grand Master of North America, and was supposed nor even master of any particular lodge. As was supposed, nor even master of any particular lodge. Furthermore, with regard to the visit in 1790, while the president did receive a written greeting from King David's Lodge, Rabbi Gunstein made no reference to a reply on Washington's part. The omission is rendered conspicuous by the fact that Gunstein did record the full text for the other three letters in question: King David's salutation and the Truro-Washington exchange. When Reverend Ezra Ely was rumored to be a Mason, he printed an editorial July 23, 1830, denying the allegation. The article included an enlightening conversation between his father and Connecticut Governor Jonathan Trumbull, a former aide-de-camp to Washington, in which Trumbull had solicited his general's advice on entering the Masonic Lodge. Washington replied, Masonry was a benevolent institution which might be employed for the best or worst of purposes, but that for the most part it was merely child's play. What a slam! And he could not give him any advice on the subject. However, for the most incriminating evidence that the father of our country was never an active Mason, the reader is referred to an exchange of real letters between Washington and Reverend G.W. Snyder of Fredericktown, Maryland. Snyder had written to warn Washington of a new secret society intent on destroying America, the Illuminati. The minister also included a book by Professor John Robinson entitled Proofs of Conspiracy. Having obviously been infected by the Masons' propaganda machine, Snyder appeals in all innocence. Upon serious reflection, I was led to think that it might be within your power to prevent the horrid plan from corrupting the brethren of the English lodges over which you preside. Washington's gracious reply puts to rest the erroneous notion that he was anyone's worshipful master. Note the accompanying date of composition, less than 2 years before his death. Mount Vernon, 1798, 7/25, 1798. The Reverend Mr. Snyder, Sir, many apologies are due to you for my not acknowledging the receipt of your obliging favor of the 22nd ultimate, and for not thanking you at an earlier period for the book you had the goodness to send me. I had heard of much of the nefarious and dangerous plan and doctrines of the Illuminati, but never saw the book until you were pleased to send it to me. The same causes which have prevented my acknowledging the receipt of your letter have prevented my reading the book hitherto, namely, the multiplicity of matters which presented upon me before, and the delineated state in which I was left after a severe fever had been removed, and which allows me to add a little more now than thanks to your kind wishes and favorable sentiments, except to correct an error you have run into of my presiding over the English lodges in this country. The fact is, I preside over none, nor have I been in one more than once or twice within the last 30 years. I believe, notwithstanding, that none of the lodges in this country are contaminated with the principles ascribed to the Society of the Illuminati. With respect, I am, sir, your obedient and humble servant, George Washington. In addition to referencing affidavits that Snyder possessed George Washington's original, now part of the Saul Feinstone collection, housed in the David Library in Washington Crossing, Pennsylvania, Governor Rittner also submitted the sworn testimony of Jared Sparks, Esquire, a leading authority on correspondence legitimacy, dated November 22nd, 1832, that all important copy was found in Washington's official letter filed at Mount Vernon. Conversely, Mr. Sparks also confirmed the absence of copies for all 5 of the non-dated copies of letters pretended by Masons to have been penned by Brother Washington. See, we got another conspiracy here. Conspiracy within conspiracies. The worst case scenario suggested that by Washington's concluding line to Snyder, written only 15 months before his death, would place his final impression of Freemasonry somewhere between his earliest assessment of mere child's play and the naivety of Mr. Madison's words, ignorant as I was of the true character of Masonry. Finally, any doubts as to Washington's bias towards subversive movements predicated on dissemblance are dispelled by the following excerpt from his farewell address, September 17th, 1796, 2 years before the one he wrote to Robert Snyder. All obstructions to the execution of the laws, all content combinations and associations under whatever plausible character with real design to direct, control, counteract, or awe the regular deliberations and actions of the constitutional authorities are destructive of this fundamental principle and of fatal tendency. They serve to organize faction, to give it an artificial, extraordinary force, to put it in the place of the delegate will of the nation. The will of the party, often a small but artful and enterprising minority of the community, and according to the alternate triumphs of different parties to make the public administration the mirror of the ill-concerted and incongruous projects of faction rather than the organ of consistent and wholesome plans, digested by common councils and modified by mutual interest. The contradictory testimonies of Washington and Madison could serve as a caution when reading about the supposed Masonic affiliation of other famous Americans, and in those rare cases when the charge is valid, a number of mitigating circumstances could be reviewed. For instance, different sources have noted that conservative senators Strom Thurmond and Jesse Helms were members of the lodge. When dealing in the human arena, one may find an exception to almost any rule. It is the option of this author that Thurmond and Helms convinced themselves that they could use the system to further their own moral agenda. Their lifetime voting records in favor of Bible-based nationalistic legislation can make them bad Masons at best and pragmatic politicians at worst. As the scripture says, ye shall know them by their fruits. Matthew 17:16. And if Satan cast out Satan, how shall then his kingdom stand? Matthew 12:26. One of the last things Helms did before retiring was to blast the Satanic United Nations in person when explaining why America was lagging behind in its duties. No one clapped when the hour-long tirade was over. Yet the Bible is clear on the matter. To obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. Let's see here. 1 Samuel 15:22. As Dr. Bob Jones Sr. used to say, it is never right to do wrong to get a chance to do right. Oddly enough, in the years after Bob Sr.'s death, Thurman served on the board of Bob Jones University. I got to go here in a minute and get my dog. This principle would also apply to a small percentage of sincere ministers who were deceived into thinking that the ends justify the means, with little understanding of the inner doctrines of Freemasonry. Successful Baptist pastors such as George W. Truett and Dallas Billington evaluated expediency over the scriptures, which, when reading out their communities to their communities. Sam P. Jones, a Methodist, and B.R. Lakin, a Baptist, made the same error in the field of evangelism. During our nation's early years, the Baptist churches were generally united in their opposition to Freemasonry. In 1800, the Yoke Association of Georgia received the inquiry, is it lawful for a minister of the gospel to frequent Masonic lodges? The prevailing consensus of opinion was, we think it inconsistent both with the Word of God and the Christian character. Therefore, all such are hereby admonished to withdraw from such company, or be subject to gospel discipline as offenders of their brethren, whose duty is to call them to an account of their conduct. Like that. Let's see here. I'm going to let this dog in real quick. I got a little bit more to read to you. Yep, and not too much. I'm going to let the dog in real quick before he drives me nuts. I'm going to drive somebody else nuts. Somebody's going to end up hurting them, and I'm going to be mad. Oh no. That's it. 3 times is enough. Man, I found a bunch of people during the night. They were swarming me the other day. Okay, whatever. Let's see. Oh. We have a church thing. I meant to read that, see what it says about that. But no. Hey. So. Okay. As previously stated, the study of Freemasonry will often be attended by confusion and frustration. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Ephesians 6:12. For instance, how could anyone accuse the 1 million Shriners of being satanic worshippers when they fund 19 high-profile children's hospitals, including 3 burn centers, and always treat children free of charge? After all, didn't Jesus say, suffer little children and forbid them not to come unto me? For of such is the kingdom of heaven, Matthew 19:14. Patriots in the American Revolution often utilize, I'll get it out, lodge is a network of secrecy to check on the intrigues of ubiquitous stories. Um, it's generally believed that the Boston Tea Party was the work of area Masons. Similarly, I can't read tonight. Protestants voters who belonged to the American Party during the 19th century Nativist movement were referred to as Know Nothings because of their clandestine affiliation with another secret society called the Order of the Star Spangled Banner. Many of these Protestant societies were actively engaged in combating the spread of Roman Catholicism. To better understand how Freemasonry evolved from its Jolly Brotherhoods of the Bottle, image to its sinister Jolly of the Brotherhoods of the Bottle, image to a sinister force promoting world revolution, one must analyze a sequence of related events. First, a distinction should be made between the modus operandi of early British Masons and that which later developed on the Connecticut continent, specifically in France, as the potential conspiracy fodder in any nation will be affected by prevailing religious sentiments. Satan used his foothold in Christian England as a launching pad for more strategic conquest in Catholic aesthetic France. Remember that the devil is a master in leading humans to create innocent-looking organizations that he will later confiscate to the owner's destruction. See any number of Christian Christian seminaries. The extension of traditional British Masonry is into France with its eventual wayward development, infectious transformation, and fatal return to England is a study that is difficult to summarize in a few paragraphs. To begin, the Paris Lodge was opened in 1725 by Charles Radcliffe. Oh my gosh, that's probably a relative of mine. I'm descended from Radcliffe's. Oh no. Henceforth known as Lord Derwentwater, a Jacobite fugitive intent on restoring the Catholic stewards to British rule. One of Radcliffe's confederates was a certain Andrew Michael Ramsay, better known as Chevalier Ramsay. In the process of time, Chevalier made the acquaintance of the famous Duke of Orleans, who just happened to be Grand Master of the Order of the Temple, a surviving or revived faction of ancient Templarism. Soon after his admission into the society, a major change was made in the structure of the Paris Lodge. Whereas the Grand Lodge of London had limited its members to 3 degrees, the French Masons introduced over 20 new ones in what would come to be known as the Scottish Rite. Mm-hmm. I'm a dog. Scottish Rite. The Templar influence can be seen by the names of such degrees as 13th, Knight of the Ninth Arc, 15th, Knight of the Sword, 17th, Knight of the East and the West, 18th, Rose-Crowned Knight, and 22nd, Prince of Libanus or Knight of the Royal Axe. A Judaic tradition can also be detected in the 11th, Chief of the 12 Tribes, and 16th, Prince of Jerusalem. The backlash of internal resistance to these changes was so violent that the government closed the Grand Lodge of France in 1767. However, this new brand of Freemasonry reappeared in 1772 as the Grand Lodge in Paris under its worshipful master, Duc de Chartres, later Philippe Egelit, whatever that name means. Although the corrupting influence of continental masonry would eventually move the English and American lodges from bad to worse, the French would maintain its leadership role for evil. The innocuous trilogy originally espoused in the British lodges, brotherly love, relief, and truth, would be henceforth overshadowed by the Parisian misnomer liberty, equality, fraternity. Webster comments on its communistic double talk. For observe the contradiction. It is impossible to have complete liberty and equality. The two are mutually exclusive. It is possible to have a system of complete liberty in which every man is free to behave as he pleases, to do what he will with his own, to rob or murder, to live, that is to say, according to the law of the jungle, ruled by the strongest. But there is no equality there. Or one may have a system of absolute equality, of cutting everyone down to the same dead level, of crushing all incentive in man to rise above his fellows, but there is no liberty there. So Grand Orient Freemasonry, by coupling together with two words for every incompatible, threw into the arena an apple of discord over which the world has never ceased to quarrel from that day to this, and which has divided the revolutionary forces into two opposing camps. Okay. Still elaborates these opposing forces of anarchy and socialism, stating perhaps the greatest difference between the two versions of the craft is that in continental masonry, the emphasis has been shifted towards world domination by violent revolution, whereas the more gentle Anglo-American version, inspired by Lord Bacon, stresses a revolution of enlightenment designed to establish their new order. I don't know. Let's see. Okay. Webster noted this distinction in 1924 when she wrote, whilst Bolivism sets out to destroy capitalism at a blow, socialism refers to a more gradual process. It is the difference between clubbing him in on the head and bleeding him to death. That is all. Thrones and altars. Whereas the Grand Lodge had decreed in 1717, that nothing concerning the religion or government shall ever be spoken in the lodge, the Grand Orient declared war on the thrones and altars, i.e., on royalty and the papacy. Ralph Epperson notes, no fewer than 8 popes have condemned Freemasonry on 400 occasions since it was founded in Britain in 1717. However, though the whore's wealth and power would bring out the worst in the beast of Freemasonry, Revelation 17:16, the real target was the lovely Lord Jesus, the King of the earth. Kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us. Psalm 2:2-3. It was a comrade, Karl Marx, Freemason pure Joseph Proudhon, 1809-65, known as the father of anarchy, who said, property is theft. With reference to his creator and future judge at the Great White Throne, Proudhon wrote, we reach knowledge in spite of him. We reach society in spite of him. Every step forward is a victory in which we overcome the divine. God is stupidity and cowardice. God is hypocrisy, and falsehood. God is tyranny and poverty. God is evil. Where humanity bows before an altar, humanity, the slaves of kings and priests, will be condemned. I swear at God, with my hand stretched out towards the heavens, that you are nothing more than the executioner of my reason, the scepter of my conscience. God is essentially, ooh, Herbie. God is essentially anti-civilized, anti-liberal, and anti-human. That is what Karl Marx, Freemason. It was a comrade of Karl Marx. Sorry, Freemason Pierre Joseph Proudhon. One of Pierre's disciples, Brother Lafargue, got so shook up after hearing him speak at the International Congress in Brussels that he started shouting, "War on God, hatred towards God. That is progress. We must shatter heaven like a ball of paper." While the communist Florines wrote in 1871, "Our enemy is God. The hatred of God is the beginning of wisdom." The former Russian Commissioner of Education, Lunarkarsky, was even more articulate. "We hate Christians and Christianity. Even the best of them must be considered our worst enemies. Christian love is an obstacle to the development of the revolution. Down with the love of one's neighbor. What we want is hate. Only then can we conquer the universe." Finally, the Freemason Delphic included the following blasphemy in his discourse at a Masonic banquet in 1902. "The triumph of the Galilean has lasted 20 centuries. He is dying in his turn. The illusion has lasted very long. The lying God in his turn disappears. He goes to rejoin the dust of the ages with the other divinities of India, Egypt, Greece, and Rome, who saw so many deluded creatures throw themselves at the foot of their altars. Freemasons, we are pleased to state that we are not unconcerned with this ruin of false prophets. The Roman Church, founded on the Galilean myth, began to decline rapidly on the day when the Masonic Association was constituted. From the political point of view, Freemasons have often varied, but in all times Freemasonry has stood firm on this principle: war on all superstitions, war on all fanaticism. Although every denunciation of God, its obvious reference to the triune being revealed in the Holy Bible, upper echelon Masons are not really atheists in a technical sense. You might say they are polytheists. On July 14, 1889, Albert Pike issued his instructions to the 23 Supreme Councils of the world. Owl's speech was recorded by A.C. de la Riviere in La Femme et l'Enfant dans la Franque. Okay, Mattacuri Universally, whatever that means. "If Lucifer were not God, when Adonai, the God of the Christians, whose deeds prove his cruelty, perfidy, and hatred of men, barbarism, and repulsion for science, could Adonai and his priests calumniate him?" Calumniate him. Okay. Yes, Lucifer is God, and unfortunately Adonai is also God, for the eternal law is that there is no light without shade, no beauty without ugliness, no white without black. For the absolute can only exist as two gods, darkness being necessary to light, to serve as its foil, as the pedestal is necessary to the statue, and to break the locomotive. And the break to the locomotive, and the break, okay, whatever that means. Thus, the doctrine of Satanism is a heresy, and the true and pure philosophic religion is the belief in Lucifer, the equal of Adonai. But Lucifer, God of light and God is good. Okay, and struggling for humanity against Adonai, the God of darkness and evil. Okay. That was crazy. But now, don't let all that tough rhetoric fool you. They're just talking trash. Ebonics were using intimidation. The truth is they are sacred to the death of the Savior. Joshua 2:9. William Still reveals how Jesus Christ, called the blessed and only potentate in 1 Timothy 6:15, has always been the Mason's worst nightmare, as he alone is the true worshipful master. 1 Corinthians 8:4-6. Masons don't count their years from the year of Christ's death because For a rather curious reason, they consider it a tragedy. In their initiation ceremony for the 18th degree, the Knight of the Rose Crucis, also known as the Rose Cross, the Red Cross, or the Rosicrucians, Masons symbolically drape the lodge room in black and sit on the floor in silence, resting their heads and their arms in mock belief around an altar above which there are three crosses, They grieve not for the death of the Son of God, but according to the French Masonic historian Abbé Augustin de Barrou, they symbolically mourn because the day Jesus was crucified was the day Christianity was born, ever to be the antagonist of Masonry. It is the time when the veil of the temple was rent asunder, when darkness and consternation was spread over the earth, when the light was darkened, when the implements of masonry were broke, when the flaming star disappeared, when the cubic stone was broken, when the word was lost. As the devil will often counterfeit God's work, the inspiration for these Masonic blasphemies can be traced to a major satanic revival that broke out in Bavaria, Germany, and later spread to the Grand Orient Lodge. Had it not been for a remarkable act of God, little would be known of this diabolical development. And then it goes to Whitespet, whatever his name is, probably the father of Weishaupt. That dude. That is another subject. But I'm probably not going to get a lot of views on this, but that's okay. It's out there. It's out there so you know that George Washington might have been an initiate, but he didn't go back, and he was not a Mason. In all these art that you see with him as his bronze statue with the apron or the paintings and stuff, that's not the case. That's not so. He didn't make it to a 33rd or 2nd degree or 12th degree or whatever. He didn't participate in it anymore, So people fabricate this thing. They deceive and are being deceived as to our first president being a Mason, and clearly he wasn't. And they only want that to show that way to encourage others to think of him as a worshipful master. They let's just put it like this: if George Washington was trademarked, they would be infringing the copyright or trademark. But of course, he's not, because they render him as some kind of grand worshipful master and this hero of the Masons, but he wasn't. Anyway, just want to point that out for 50 minutes. I hope you enjoy it. God bless. Take care. And Jesus Christ is the holy and only true potentate. He is the worshipful master. See ya.